In 1915, a man bought a very specific plot of land in the foothills of the Himalayas, like right in Darjeeling, India.
Hmm.
And he wasn't planning to build a summer home or, start a farm or anything like that. He was building a
A
temple.
massive one, yeah.
Right. And inside this temple, he planned to conduct a 7-day, 7-night musical symphony. And he thought this symphony would be so overwhelmingly powerful, so like perfectly tuned to the vibrations of the cosmos, that he believed it would literally physically cause the universe to collapse.
Yeah, and we really need to emphasize that. It wasn't intended as a metaphor.
You're right.
He fully, genuinely believed that at the climax of this performance, the stone pillars of his actual temple would just crumble into dust, like the participants would dematerialize, and reality as we know it would end.
It's just wild. So welcome to this deep dive. If you're listening to this, you are stepping into one of the most wild, ambitious, and ultimately illuminating intellectual mysteries we have ever unpacked on this show.
For sure.
Our mission today is to navigate this massive, dense, and frankly fascinating stack of texts. We're looking at two very different but, deeply connected maps of reality.
Exactly. So on one side, we have the historical and fictional accounts of this world-ending symphony, which was called the Mysterium.
The Mysterium.
Right? It was conceived by a real historical figure, the Russian composer Alexander Scriabin. And then on the other side, acting as this like counterweight to Scriabin's whole fever dream, we have a modern philosophical framework, and our sources just refer to this as the curriculum.
And the goal for you, the listener, is really this. We are going to examine how the curriculum takes the absolute best, most ambitious ideas of the Mysterium, specifically this intoxicating, deeply human idea that we actively participate in creating reality, and it grounds them. It takes that magic and anchors it in a rigorous, deeply ethical worldview that basically protects us from outright delusion.
Which is so needed. Because the stakes here are as high as they get, really.
Yeah, totally.
We're trying to answer a really fundamental human question. Like, how can we live a life full of profound, world-shaking meaning without losing our grip on physical reality? And crucially, without losing our compassion for the people around us.
Right, exactly. So to even begin to answer that, I feel like we have to start with the historical overture of absolute hubris. Like, we need to talk about Alexander Scriabin.
Oh, yeah.
Who was this guy who thought he could musically explode the universe?
So, Alexander Scriabin was a brilliant Russian composer. And by the early 20th century, specifically around like 1915, he was at the absolute top of his game.
Okay.
Many people in his homeland regarded him as the greatest contemporary composer alive at the time. He was this incredible piano virtuoso. But his ambitions started to bleed far past the boundaries of just writing beautiful music for concert halls.
Right.
He didn't want to just move his audience to tears. He literally wanted to change the fabric of existence.
Yeah, I mean, ambition doesn't even begin to cover it. He spent the last decade of his life completely consumed by this magnum opus, the Mysterium. And, if you're listening to this and picturing an orchestra in tuxedos, just throw that image away.
Yeah, completely.
Because, as we mentioned, this was a 7-day, 7-night ritual in a custom-built temple. He actually wanted the entire population of the world to participate. He envisioned everyone dressed in white robes.
And it wasn't even just humans. Scriabin insisted that animals, insects, and birds all had to be incorporated into the performance.
Insects.
Insects, yeah. He was attempting what the Germans call a Gesamtkunstwerk.
Right, the total work of art.
Exactly, complete fusion of the arts. But he was elevating it to the point of literal cosmic transfiguration.
The details in the text are just staggering. He wanted giant bells suspended from the clouds.
Which, how do you even do that?
Right. How? Nobody knows. But that was the vision. And there were to be these massive columns of incense that would alter the breathing of the crowd. Plus dancers moving in these specific sacred geometries, and perfumes released into the air at very specific musical intervals.
It's full sensory overload.
Exactly. Oh, and constantly shifting light patterns. He and a friend even spent their Sunday afternoons developing a completely new language specifically for this ritual.
Yes, the language of sighs.
Yeah, it was based on Sanskrit, but it incorporated human sighs and cries and the rhythmic sounds of inhaled and exhaled breath.
And see, what's truly fascinating here isn't just the spectacle of it all, but the underlying philosophy. Scriabin didn't just want to create an immersive theater experience.
Yeah.
He was heavily immersed in Russian mystic symbolism and theosophy.
Right.
And because of this, he believed deeply in the theurgic function of art.
Theurgy. Okay, let's unpack that term for a second because that is so central to everything we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah. So, theurgy, fundamentally, is the belief that a ritual or a work of art can have a direct material effect on reality.
Like it actually does something.
Exactly. It's not symbolic, it's operational. Scriabin believed the cosmos was permeated by this divine underlying energy called akasa.
Akasa, right.
And he thought of akasa as this single primordial vibration that possessed the properties of breath, sound, light, and touch, like all at the same time.
Okay, so if I'm tracking his logic here, his thought process was, if the universe is made of this foundational vibration, and if I can perfectly coordinate all these sensory inputs.
Colored lights, the tonalities, all of it.
Right. The music, the incense, the geometry of the temple. If he coordinates all of that, he can actually hack into that vibration. Like he can channel the akasa.
Precisely. He literally believed that if he played the right sequence of notes, accompanied by the exact right scent and the exact right color of light, the physical stone of his Himalayan temple would lose its structural integrity.
It's like he was trying to compose the cheat code for the universe and just play it on a piano.
That is such a brilliant way to frame it. He totally viewed himself as a cosmic hacker. I mean, he famously had a protagonist in an earlier abandoned opera declare, "I shall possess the world."
Wow.
And Scriabin truly believed he would. But, as history often does with extreme hubris, it intervened.
Yeah, reality caught up with him.
Exactly. Before he could finish the piece, Scriabin died of septicemia from an infected boil on his lip, of all things.
Yeah.
This was in April 1915. He was only 43 years old.
It's so jarring. Out of this massive world-ending vision, he left behind only, 54 pages of fragmented piano score and a libretto?
Just fragments, yeah.
It's a tragic, bizarre end, but it brings up a really important question for you listening to this right now. Like, why are we spending so much time talking about a guy who tried to musically hack the universe 100 years ago?
Right.
What does this have to do with our modern lives?
Well, we have to talk about Scriabin because we have to acknowledge the profound, almost gravitational seductiveness of his idea. We all want our art, our beliefs, our political movements, and our daily rituals to have literal world-shaping power. Like when you're sitting in traffic or when you're overwhelmed by terrible news, there is this ancient, deeply human desire to just
Fix it.
exactly, to overcome our physical limitations through sheer creative will. We want to believe that our minds are powerful enough to rewrite the rules.
It's the ultimate fantasy of control. But as beautiful and breathtaking as Scriabin's vision was, it represents the ultimate extreme of a very dangerous idea.
The idea that consciousness alone dictates reality.
Right. That if we just feel something strongly enough or perform the right morning routine or say the right affirmations, the physical world will just bend to our will.
And that is exactly where the danger lies and why we need our second major text for this deep dive. Because if Scriabin is the overture of beautiful, terrifying hubris, the curriculum is the antidote.
Yes.
It shows us how to harness that desire for meaning without losing our minds.
So let's pivot and introduce the curriculum. In our sources, this is presented as a comprehensive philosophical worldview. And what I really love about it is that it starts by drawing two massive lines in the sand. Like it begins with a very firm refusal of two opposite errors.
Correct. So the first error it strictly rejects is absolute materialism.
Okay, define that for us.
Absolute materialism is the idea that only things that can be measured, weighed, or put under a microscope are real. In a strictly materialist view, concepts like deep meaning, the power of a symbol, or human spirituality are just delusions. They're basically just biological misfirings in our ape brains to help us survive.
Right, so it rejects a flat, cold, purely mechanical universe.
Exactly. But it equally and forcefully rejects the second error, which is the ungrounded mystical view.
Which is the Scriabin side.
Right. This is the error that consciousness simply invents reality at will. The curriculum rejects the idea that your personal meaning, your desire, or your belief can overrule physical evidence just because those beliefs feel spiritually powerful to you. That was Scriabin's fatal error. He thought his musical symbols could overwrite the physics of a stone temple.
Okay, I want to pause here for a second because this is where a lot of people get stuck. If we aren't just meat machines in a dead, cold universe, but we also aren't omnipotent wizards who can manifest reality with our thoughts.
Right.
What exactly are we? Where is the middle ground here?
So, the curriculum proposes a concept it calls participatory reality. The idea is that we do not create reality out of thin air, But we also don't just passively observe it like an audience watching a movie. We participate in it.
Okay.
Our attention, our interpretations, the culture we build, and the care we give actually actively shape the world we inhabit.
But, and this is a massive but, the curriculum adds a non-negotiable safety net to this idea. It states that belief shapes reality only through a channel.
That phrasing is so vital. Only through a channel.
I have to push back here on behalf of the listener, because whenever I hear the phrase belief shapes reality, my alarm bells instantly go off.
Oh, absolutely.
Are we just one step away from that toxic internet culture of manifesting? Like, if I really want a promotion, I just have to, vibrate at the frequency of wealth. Or worse, if someone gets cancer, do we blame them for not believing hard enough? Do we look at them and say, oh, you must have manifested that illness through your negative thoughts?
I am so glad you brought that up, because that is the exact trap that participatory philosophies often fall into. And it is exactly why the curriculum installs what it calls the trauma safeguard.
The trauma safeguard. Let's break that down.
This is perhaps the most important ethical rule in the entire framework. The curriculum explicitly states, care before explanation. It insists, in no uncertain terms, that a person's inner beliefs do not control weather systems, cellular mutations, systemic poverty, or the choices of other people.
Right.
Suffering is physical first. Metaphysical explanations should never, ever be forced onto someone's pain.
There is a line from the text that I highlighted like 3 times. It says, a wound is not healed by calling it symbolic.
It is so foundational to this worldview. You cannot use deep meaning to excuse physical neglect. You cannot use the idea of participatory reality to isolate vulnerable people or to blame a victim for their suffering.
Exacto.
If someone breaks their leg, you don't tell them to examine their spiritual alignment, you set the bone.
It's so refreshing to hear that. The text actually warns against these aberrant schools of thought that demand total surrender to some divine will, or that use ritual as this escape hatch to avoid dealing with the real world.
Which is what Scriabin was trying to do.
Right. Scriabin wanted to literally dissolve the world because it was too heavy. It was too full of friction and constraint. The curriculum says, no, the constraints of the physical world are where the music actually happens. Like, you can't play a guitar without tension on the strings.
That's a beautiful analogy. True enlightenment, according to the curriculum, isn't found by fleeing into some empty, idealized void. It's developed right in the middle of the world, engaging with its messy, physical, often painful truths.
So, to prevent us from making Scriabin's mistake, to stop us from confusing our spiritual or emotional beliefs with physical facts, the curriculum provides this incredible map of existence.
It really is a masterpiece of categorization.
It divides human life into 4 distinct layers. So if you are listening to this right now, I want you to imagine a 4-story building, and every single thing you experience happens on one of these floors.
This is where the framework transitions from abstract philosophy to an incredibly practical daily tool. The 4 layers are the physical, the lived, the social, and the symbolic. Let's walk through them.
Let's do it.
First, the physical layer. This is the bedrock. This includes bodies, matter, disease, ecology, gravity, thermodynamics.
The raw stuff.
Yeah. It is the layer of what happens whether or not a person prefers it or believes in it. A rock falls at 9.8 meters per second squared, regardless of your spiritual beliefs.
Right. Gravity doesn't care about your mood.
Exactly.
Second, we have the lived layer. This is perception, emotion, memory, desire, pain. It's what it is actually like to be a human being experiencing the world from the inside. So if you feel a profound sense of grief, that grief is 100% real in the lived layer, even if I can't put that grief on a scale and weigh it in the physical layer.
Absolutely. Third is the social layer. This includes laws, money, status, language, institutions. These are the shared intersubjective realities we build together.
Like things that are real because we agree they are.
Right. A $20 bill is just a piece of paper with ink on it in the physical layer.
Okay.
But in the social layer, it has power, weight, and reality because we all collectively agree that it does.
And finally, the 4th floor, the symbolic layer. This is myth, ritual, art, religion, deep meaning. This is the layer where life becomes legible and profound.
The layer of resonance.
Yeah, where a wedding ring isn't just a piece of metal, which is the physical layer. And it's not just a legal contract in the social layer, or even just an emotional feeling in the lived layer. It becomes a symbol of eternal fidelity.
Now, here is the golden rule of the curriculum, the mechanism that keeps us sane through all of this. Each of these four layers has its own jurisdiction and, crucially, its own currency of truth.
I love this concept of currency. Break that down for us.
So the physical layer trades in the currency of empirical evidence, measurement, and repeatability. The social layer trades in the currency of intersubjective agreement, contracts, and institutional facts.
Okay.
The lived layer trades in fidelity to inner experience, like, are you being honest about how you feel? And the symbolic layer trades in resonance, coherence, and transformative power. Like, does this myth organize your life in a meaningful way?
Let's give a concrete example of this because I want to make sure the listener can apply this right now. It's like trying to pay your mortgage with a really moving poem.
I love this example.
Imagine you walk into a bank, the teller asks for your payment, and you just recite this beautifully written, soul-crushing poem about the nature of home.
The poem might be profoundly beautiful. It possesses immense truth in the symbolic layer. And it might literally change the bank teller's life in the Liz layer by moving them to tears.
But the bank operates strictly in the social and physical layers.
Right.
They only accept the specific currency of those layers, money and legal tender. The teller will wipe away a tear and say, that was beautiful, but we are still foreclosing on your house. You cannot spend one layer's currency in another layer's market.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture of human history, mixing these currencies is the root cause of so much mass human misery.
Oh, absolutely.
Delusion happens when we try to spend symbolic currency in the physical layer.
Which is exactly what Scriabin did. He tried to use the symbolic currency of musical notes to physically destroy a stone temple. He mixed up the layers.
Or consider fundamentalism. When people try to make a symbolic myth function as a literal, historical, scientific fact, they are mixing currencies, and it results in cognitive dissonance and often violence.
Yeah.
Conversely, when we try to make science, which is native to the physical layer, answer questions of deep human meaning, we get nihilism and reductionism. You cannot put love in a centrifuge. If you try, you'll just conclude that love doesn't exist, which is a failure to understand the lived and symbolic layers.
The curriculum disciplines us to honor all four layers without confusing them. For example, if I have a vivid, terrifying dream about a snake biting me,
Okay, yeah.
in the lived and symbolic layers, that dream is true. It might reveal a deep inner conflict or an anxiety I have about a toxic friendship. It has immense value.
Right, it's telling you something real.
But if I wake up and refuse to go into my backyard because I believe a literal snake is waiting for me, I've incorrectly exported a symbolic truth into the physical layer. I've become delusional.
This separation of layers brings up a really bracing, somewhat uncomfortable rule from the text, and it's this. Significance is morally neutral.
Significance is morally neutral.
Man, that is a tough pill to swallow, because we are so wired to believe that if something feels huge and profound, it must be inherently good.
Yes, human beings are easily seduced by magnitude. We constantly mistake intensity for truth or goodness. Just because an experience is intense, luminous, or world-altering like Scriabin's hypothetical 7-day Himalayan concert would have been, does not mean it is good.
Let's think about this in the real world. A cultic narrative can feel incredibly luminous and significant to the people inside it.
Absolutely.
Or like a manipulative, codependent romantic relationship can feel profound. It can feel like the most significant thing that has ever happened to you.
But intensity is not an ethic.
Exactly. The curriculum defines evil in a very grounded, almost mechanical way. It defines evil simply as distorted relation that produces harm.
Distorted relation.
Yeah, it does not matter how spiritually significant a ritual feels to you. It does not matter how much resonance it has in the symbolic layer. If it produces physical or lived harm, if it distorts your relation to others, it is evil. Full stop.
Okay, so if we take a breath here and look at where we are, we have this four-story building of reality. We're constantly navigating between the physical, lived, social, and symbolic layers. We're trying to spend the right currency in the right place.
Right.
But this brings up a huge question for me. What exactly is the self that is doing the navigating? If I am participating in reality, who is the I? Both the curriculum and the fictional Mysterium texts within our sources offer a deeply intertwined answer to this, don't they?
They do. The curriculum firmly rejects the idea of the self as a sealed ghost in a machine.
Okay.
It rejects the idea of a permanent, unchanging soul that just floats above history, completely unaffected by the world. Instead, it defines the self as a relational center of becoming.
A relational center of becoming. That sounds beautiful, but, a bit abstract. The Mysterium texts expand on this perfectly with a concept they call chronomnesis. Let's unpack chronomnesis because this completely blew my mind.
Chronomnesis, combining the roots for time and memory, is described in the text as the idea that the self is a tapestry that builds the very loom upon which it is woven.
Let's just sit with that image for a second. You are a tapestry, but you are also constructing the wooden loom that holds the threads. It is this profound concept of recursion.
Yes, it's a feedback loop. The text argues that a person is not a static noun. A person is a verb. You are largely the residue of your repeated intentional acts.
Okay, so every choice matters.
Every deliberate choice you make does two things simultaneously. First, it expresses who you are in that current moment. Second, it leaves a residue that revises and shapes the self that will make the next choice tomorrow.
So there is no fixed static agent behind the curtain pulling the levers. We are a recursive pattern that alters its own frame as it runs. But wait, I have to ask the obvious question here.
Go for it.
If we are constantly rewriting ourselves based on our actions, how do we keep from spiraling into a bad pattern?
What do you mean?
Well, think about anxiety. If I make an anxious choice today, say I cancel plans with a friend because I'm overwhelmed, I am expressing anxiety. But according to chronomnesis, I am also building a loom made of anxiety.
Oh, I see.
Which means tomorrow, my starting position is slightly more anxious than it was today, making it even more likely I'll make another anxious choice. So if I am the loom and the tapestry, how do I avoid just building a prison of my own worst habits? How do we build a good loom?
That is the core dilemma of human behavior, really.
Yeah.
And the texts answer this by introducing the concept of telesis.
Telesis. Okay, define that for us.
Telesis is purposeful motion. It is intention structured as nested, dependent aims.
Nested aims. Give me an example of what that looks like.
Think of it like a sentence where one clause supports and feeds into the next. If you sit down to meditate, you aren't just sitting. The texts provide this exact nested structure. She breathed to steady her mind, to hear her own judgment, to act on it. You see the three depths of purpose there. The breathing is the physical act, which serves the inner aim of steadying the mind, which serves the higher aim of accessing judgment, which serves the ultimate aim of taking action in the world.
Ah, I see. Without telesis, without that nested purpose, repetition is just a habit. It's just you pacing back and forth in your cell.
Exactly.
But with telesis, repetition becomes a discipline. You are driving the recursion intentionally. And the text says this purposeful repetition moves through a spiral it calls cyclection.
Yes, cyclection has four continuous phases: sensing, learning, expressing, and transforming.
Okay, walk me through that.
You take in information, you adapt to it, you act on it, and that action transforms you. Then you return to sensing, but because you've been transformed, you are sensing the world from changed ground. You are on a higher rung of the spiral.
But to fully answer my question about avoiding a bad spiral, the text introduced this fascinating mathematical metaphor, and I really want to make sure we get this right. It's the metaphor of the cardioid.
The cardioid is a deeply revealing mathematical concept. Visually, a cardioid is a heart-shaped curve.
Okay.
But it's how that curve is generated that matters here. It emerges from applying a very simple mathematical rule repeatedly around a circle. The text specifically mentions modular arithmetic functions like multiplying points on a circle by 2 and connecting the lines.
Right, and if you do it once or twice, it looks like a mess of lines. But if you run that recursion hundreds of times, this complex, highly structured heart shape emerges out of nowhere.
The lesson of the cardioid for human psychology is this: a simple rule, repeated blindly, can create complex, unexpected, and sometimes monstrous shapes. The complexity of the heart shape wasn't added from the outside by an artist. It is the inevitable structural result of the recursion running its course.
So to map this back to our behavior, if your internal rule is flawed, let's say your underlying rule is always protect myself first, trust no one.
Right, a defensive rule.
Yeah. If you run that rule once, you might just seem a little guarded at a party. But if you run that recursion every day for 10 years, the math compounds. The recursion will build a complex, impenetrable structure of total isolation and narcissism.
Exactly.
The monster isn't an accident, it's the math running its course.
Precisely. The tapestry weaves a very specific, inescapable pattern. So, to prevent a bad recursion, the curriculum installs what we can think of as mechanical safeguards.
Okay.
It doesn't just offer platitudes and suggest we be nice to people. It embeds the 6 virtues as structural, operational necessities for the self-building process.
This was a huge light bulb moment for me when I was reading this. The virtues aren't just moral decorations to make you look like a good person. They are the safety valves on the machine of the self.
Exactly. They keep the engine from exploding.
Let's look at them. Humility, charity, gratitude, temperance, patience, and empathy. How do these mechanically stop a bad recursion?
Let's take humility. In a recursive system, a self that is completely certain of its own rightness stops taking in new information. It stops the sensing and learning phases of the spiral.
Oh, because it already thinks it knows everything.
Right. Humility is structurally required because it keeps the loop open to correction. Without it, the loop closes and becomes a cult of one.
What about charity and gratitude?
Charity and gratitude serve to bind the self to others. They are the tethers that keep your spiral connected to the social and lived layers of other people, preventing you from spinning off into total self-absorption.
That makes total sense. And temperance.
Temperance acts as a governor on an engine. It controls the speed and intensity of the recursion so it doesn't spin out of control into manic obsession.
And empathy.
Empathy is arguably the most vital. Empathy supplies the crucial data that a closed system lacks, the inner states of other people.
Give me an example of what that looks like when it's missing.
Well, think about a highly intelligent, highly driven person who lacks empathy. They might build a very complex, successful loom in terms of wealth or power.
Right.
But because they are missing that data input, their resulting shape will eventually cause immense harm, acting as a destructive force to everyone around them.
Okay, so we are a recursive relational self. We understand that we are the tapestry in the loom and that we need these virtues to keep the machine from breaking down. But what is the actual raw material we're feeding into this machine? Like, what are we weaving with? The texts tell us that the thread is our attention, and they map out this material with mathematical precision. Let's look at the mechanics of transformation.
This is where the Mysterium texts provide a staggeringly detailed map of human attention. They categorize every possible state of human attention into 108 distinct states.
108.
Again, this isn't just a mystical arbitrary number chosen because it sounds spiritual. It's a calculated grid.
Walk us through the math. How do we get 108?
So they identify 6 senses.
Wait, 6? I thought there were 5.
Right, the traditional 5-site sound, smell, touch, taste. But they include the mind itself as the 6th sense.
Ah, okay, because the mind perceives thoughts and ideas.
Exactly, so that's 6. Then they identify 3 times: past memory, the present moment, and future anticipation. So 6 times 3 is 18.
Right.
Next, they identify 3 valences, which is the emotional flavor of the attention: pleasant, neutral, and painful. So 18 times 3 is 54.
Getting closer.
And finally, they identify 2 currents: the drive to preserve what you currently have, or the drive to exceed it and seek more. 54 times 2 is 108.
So it's a complete grid. Every single possible state of attention you can experience right now fits into one of those 108 slots.
For example, if you were sitting at your desk worrying about a meeting tomorrow, you are in the mind sense, future time, painful valence, and exceed current, because you want to change the impending outcome.
But what I find so brilliant is that this isn't just a flat spreadsheet. The text takes these 108 states and maps them onto a specific 3D geometric shape, a torus.
Yes.
For anyone visualizing this, a torus is a donut shape. Why a donut? Why not just a flat piece of paper?
Because the shape explains how human experience actually feels over time. If you travel on a flat sheet of paper, you eventually hit an edge and stop. You can't go any further. But human experience isn't linear like that. We travel through life and frequently return to the exact same sensory position.
Yes, you find yourself back in your childhood bedroom, or dealing with the exact same argument with your partner that you had 3 years ago, or feeling that familiar wave of imposter syndrome.
Exactly. But because of the geometry of the torus, you aren't just spinning in a flat circle. When you loop back around the donut to that familiar coordinate, you have traversed time.
Okay, I see.
You arrive at the same XY coordinate, but your Z-axis has shifted. You are returning to the familiar problem, but you are arriving with a different valence or a different current. You are forever changed by the journey.
I find that incredibly validating. When you feel like you are dealing with the exact same problem you thought you solved 5 years ago, you get so frustrated you think, I haven't made any progress.
Right, it feels like failure.
But the torus model says, no, you aren't at the start. You've completed a loop. You are encountering the same terrain, but you are a different person encountering it.
And the texts don't just leave us to spin around this donut aimlessly. How we navigate that torus, how we actively transform our raw attention into something higher, is governed by a system they call the 9 seals.
Okay, let's get into the seals.
This is essentially the curriculum of inner alchemy.
Let's break down the seals, because when I read this, it felt like a deeply philosophical video game skill tree. It's a 3x3 grid. Walk us through it.
The grid represents 3 developmental paths. The top row is the outward world of raw action: power, assistance, and responsibility.
Got it.
The middle row is the required inner condition: harmony, patience, and sincerity.
Okay, so that's the filter.
Right. And the bottom row is the integrated, mature result: completion, wisdom, and protection.
So instead of unlocking a heavier sword or a fireball spell, you are unlocking the ability to transform raw human impulses into mature states of being. How does a column work in practice?
Let's look at the first column: power. Raw power is just the ability to exert force or make things happen. But raw power must mature. If you filter your raw power down through the inner condition of harmony, meaning you align your power with the people and environment around you, it results in the bottom tier: completion. Things get built sustainably.
And the second column is assistance. This is the desire to help people. But we all know that the desire to help can actually be overbearing or even destructive if it's impatient.
Exactly.
The text says assistance must be filtered through patience. If you do that, the integrated result is actual wisdom. You know when to help and how to help, rather than just rushing in and taking over.
The third column is responsibility. Being in charge. If responsibility is filtered through sincerity, meaning you are honest about your motives and your limitations, it matures into protection. You become a true guardian.
And the text is explicit that having only the top row, having power, assistance, and responsibility without the inner rows to filter them, is the most common failure of strong people.
Very common.
Power without harmony isn't completion, it's tyranny. Assistance without patience is just interference. And responsibility without sincerity breeds shame and hypocrisy.
Furthermore, these seals aren't meant to be held statically by one person. They flow into each other between people through three streams: teaching, sustaining, and learning.
It's an ecosystem.
Yeah. The seeker learns and becomes the practitioner. The practitioner sustains the work and eventually becomes the teacher. And the teacher must always loop back to become the student again.
When a group of people engages in this flow together, when they're all utilizing the seals and checking their recursion, we reach a beautiful concept the texts call symphoria.
Symphoria is defined as the resonance of shared direction.
It's what happens when we align our purpose with others without any coercion. It's when leaders act like conductors listening to an orchestra rather than commanders barking orders at a platoon.
But symphoria is highly fragile. The texts outline that it requires three things to exist. The participants must have autonomy, they must feel competent, and they must feel connected.
Right.
If a shared purpose is imposed on a group without those three elements, it isn't symphoria, it is simply coercion. And coercion will inevitably fall apart the moment the enforcement mechanism stops.
Now, to really drive home the difference between symphoria and coercion, and to show what happens when the recursive self is trapped in a bad loop, we have to talk about the ghost story embedded in these sources.
Ah, yes, the tale of Gloaming Rock.
When I was reading the source materials, I was not expecting a full-blown gothic horror story in the middle of all this philosophy, but it is the perfect, visceral illustration of everything we've been talking about. Let's set the scene for the listener.
So, Gloaming Rock provides a dark narrative mirror to the philosophical concepts. It's a classic Gothic setup. An unnamed heir returns to a decaying ancestral manor. The house is built precariously on a cliff over a crushing violent tide.
And the sensory details the text uses are incredible. The house is just saturated in salt, but it's not just sea spray from the ocean below. It's ritual salt. It's drawn in thick spirals and sigils across the floorboards to bind something. The heir arrives and finds a ledger left by their father, sealed in heavy red wax. And the ledger reveals the terrifying truth. The family inheritance isn't land or a title or money. The inheritance is a debt.
The house itself is described not as a home, but as a living contract. The text says, each chamber a covenant, each mirror marginalia. Generations ago, the heir's great-great-grandfather bartered with something ancient and terrible in the deep ocean, caging it to save the surrounding valley from destruction.
But the cage isn't free. It requires an anchor. It requires a blood heir of the family to stand watch, trapped in the house, to constantly renew the seal. The heir's father died right there at his desk, having trapped his own child into this exact same duty. He left a silver locket that acts as a physical manifestation of this contract.
This is the ultimate coercive force. The house literally waits for the heir's signature in the ledger. It denies the heir any autonomy.
It is the absolute antithesis of symphoria. In Gloaming Rock, the shared purpose is protecting the valley, but that purpose is imposed through generational entrapment and trauma. It's a closed, recursive loop.
The story reaches its climax during an event the house orchestrates called the Masked Funeral. It's a terrifying ritual where spectral guests, all bound by similar ancient contracts, appear in the ballroom. They all wear masks to hide their complicity.
And they begin to dance the 13th dance. This part gave me chills. The music playing in the ballroom is described as playing backward. It is unspooling memory.
Or reversing the flow.
The house is using the backward music and the pressure of the dance to force the heir's hand, trying to coerce them into signing the contract in the ledger and accepting the trap.
But the heir understands the nature of the trap. The heir realizes a loophole in the structure of the house. The house, as a rigid, coercive system, cannot read mirrors properly.
To break the binding without releasing the monster into the valley, the heir does something brilliant. The heir steps up to a mirror and speaks the true name of the bound entity backward into the glass.
Wow.
By reflecting the coercion back on itself, the heir unravels the contract, strips the house of its power, and shatters the loop.
It's a masterful narrative embodiment of breaking a closed, toxic recursion. The heir uses reflection, both literally with the mirror and metaphorically through self-awareness, to shatter the coercive loop. They refuse to be a passive victim of the loom they inherited from their ancestors.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of our deep dive today. If we are sovereign, relational beings, if we are building our own looms, how do we protect ourselves from coercive forces in our real lives? Forces like the ones at Gloaming Rock.
Right.
And conversely, how do we ensure that our own tightly held worldview doesn't become a coercive cult to the people around us?
This specific problem is addressed in the final section of our sources, Volume V of Mysterium, the Sovereign Root. This section dives into what it calls the encroachments of the outer powers.
The outer powers, that sounds like science fiction.
The text uses metaphorical entities to describe them, calling them golems and the misaligned. But in a modern context, these represent any systems, algorithms, corporations, or institutions that seek to shape human behavior without breath, without reflection, and crucially, without consent.
So a social media algorithm that tracks my attention and feeds me outrage to keep me scrolling so it can sell ads, that is a golem. It is an outer power encroaching on my sovereignty.
Exactly. It is a system trying to hijack your recursion, trying to feed specific thread into your loom so you build the shape they want you to build.
Oh man, that is a dark thought.
To protect against these, the text introduces the 12 ritual keys. They are essentially a liturgy of cognitive and physical autonomy.
Give us an example of a key.
There is the key of cryptic sanctuary, which is the practice of sealing your private thoughts and quiet moments from uninvited surveillance or monetization.
Like putting your phone away.
Right, literally unplugging.
Cool.
There is also the key of the unmasking of golems, which demands transparency from the algorithms and systems that try to guide our perception. We must demand to see the code, so to speak.
The ultimate goal of both the philosophical curriculum and these mystical texts is a state called New Sophia. Let's define that because it's the destination of this entire journey.
New Sophia translates to lived wisdom, and the text makes a vital distinction. Wisdom is not a final destination. It is not a fact you memorize, put on a shelf, and say, I am now wise. It is a way of continuing. The fundamental question of New Sophia isn't, what is the ultimate objective truth? The question is, what shall I become in this exact moment?
There is a quote here. We cease to wander not by reaching a destination, but by carrying a direction. I love that.
It's beautiful.
But here is the final hurdle. If we are constantly becoming and we are creating meaning and we are navigating these 4 layers, we run right back into Alexander Scriabin's problem. How do we know we aren't just deluding ourselves? How do we know our beautifully constructed loom isn't actually a weapon?
Sovereign Root connects back to the curriculum's final, most vital, unbreakable rule. And it is this: no worldview certifies itself.
Say that again, let that sink in for the listener because it is the core of everything we've discussed today.
No worldview certifies itself. What this means is that internal coherence is not enough to prove that something is true or good. Profound, heart-stopping beauty is not enough. You can build a system of thought that is perfectly logical within its own borders, and it can still be entirely, dangerously disconnected from reality.
To put it bluntly, a cult is perfectly coherent to the people inside it. The logic makes sense if you accept the premise. Scriabin's plan to end the world made perfect sense within the internal logic of his theosophical beliefs.
Exactly. Therefore, any valid map of reality, any worldview you hold, must willingly submit to an external audit.
An audit.
Yeah. The curriculum states that a worldview fails the audit if it refuses external correction. It fails if it makes people cruel, grandiose, evasive, or indifferent to the physical suffering of others. and it fails if it launders symbolic meaning into physical fact.
This is the ultimate correction to Scriabin's historical hubris. Scriabin wanted to force reality to bend to his art. He wanted to impose his personal symbolic meaning onto the physical fabric of the Himalayas. He refused the external audit of physics and humanity.
The curriculum asks something much harder of us, but ultimately far more beautiful. It asks us to use our art, our deepest beliefs, and the incredible power of our attention to actively participate in reality. But it demands we do so while humbly submitting to external correction and the physical duty of care.
It rescues the best part of Scriabin's fever dream. It keeps the magic of conscious participation. It keeps the sacredness of our attention. But it brackets all of that wild, cosmic ambition with rigorous, grounded ethics.
It takes the cheat code for the universe. Instead of trying to blow up the console to escape the game, it teaches us how to play the game with unimaginable depth, responsibility, and compassion. It is a philosophy of purposeful becoming, firmly planted in the unyielding facts of the physical world.
We've covered an immense, almost overwhelming amount of ground today. From a Russian composer trying to shatter the sky with giant bells, to the 4 layers of reality, the recursive loom of the self, the math of the cardioid, the 108 states on the torus, the ghost of gloaming rock, and the ultimate necessity of the external audit.
And despite the complexity, it all centers on this single, radically empowering realization. You are an active participant in a living system. You matter to the fabric of it.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought to carry into the rest of your day. We talked about auditing your own worldview to make sure you aren't stuck in a coercive loop. We talked about the torus of your attention. Tomorrow, you are inevitably going to circle back to a familiar coordinate on that donut. You will face a recurring frustration, a familiar argument, or a persistent memory. It will feel like you haven't moved at all. But remember, you are the weaver building your own loom. When you hit that familiar spot tomorrow, what specific virtue will you carry into it? Will you bring patience where you normally bring raw power? You get to choose the z-axis. But beyond your own internal choices, look at the external forces. Look at the algorithms currently feeding you information on your phone. Are they acting as the outer powers we talked about? Are they quietly weaving a loom for you without your consent, feeding you anger or fear to keep your attention locked in a closed loop? Next time you open an app or read a headline, ask yourself, who is really choosing the music for this dance? Are you participating in symphoria, or are you being coerced?
Because the music of your life is made in the returning, and you must protect the sovereignty of your own attention.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Mysterium and the curriculum. Keep questioning, keep submitting your maps of reality to the audit of compassion, and remember that when you look at the blueprint of your own life, you aren't just reading the lines. You are the architect, and you are the building, learning to stand in the muddy, magnificent waters of reality.
Until next time, listen closely to the symphony.
And remember, you are an active participant in it, not just an audience member. Take care.